And again, don't let the scope of the vision cause you to lose sight of the metaphor that's in it and the potential that you can have visions that shape and alter the course of your family and yourself in a way that impacts eternity. This is dream season continues. My wife had an epic dream last night. We're gonna have to talk about that. I have to dig into that one. It's not interpreted yet, but any dreams to share? All right. So in a minute, we'll take testimony from my wife, Candace, of a dream that she wants to share, just so we can learn more about interpretation. But this is our 5th week looking at dreams. And this is our 2nd week looking at the dreams of the prophets, specifically involving the prophet Daniel. So last week, we saw Daniel as an interpreter. This week, we'll see Daniel as a dreamer. And Joseph has kind of the reverse. Joseph dreams when he's younger, and then he does interpreting when he is older. And so Daniel's kind of the reverse. Daniel's dreams are epic. He dreams of the Messianic kingdom and sees the world empires. He dreams of Alexander the Great and Antiochus Epiphanes, who you probably heard of Alexander the Great, but if you didn't deep dive into prophecy, you may not have heard of Antiochus Epiphanes, but he was Hitler before Hitler to the Jews. And the entire Hanukkah holiday is centered around the revolt against Antiochus and his decrees that he has established. Daniel dreams, in his dream, he has Gabriel, the angel, appear to him. And then he has Jesus appear to him. And Jesus tells him that his guardian angel is Michael, the archangel. That's a good dream. That's a pretty amazing dream. So I look forward to getting into those. But we're trying to do some workshopping and help you kind of see the value of our personal dreams. Of course, a day like this, when you talk about Daniel's dreams, you're like, I'm probably never going to have a dream of this scope and magnitude, of this eternal impact. And so I think it's helpful for us to see what the Lord's doing in our hearts. Last week we heard from Joe. Just a wonderful way the Lord taught him how to process his fear from the Psalms by giving him an outline in a dream. And this morning I asked Candace to share a little bit of a dream, what the Lord's doing in her heart through it.
So this dream was from a year ago, next month, it'll be a year. And I had this dream, and then the very next day, a prophetic word, a heavy prophetic word was given to me, one that I didn't quite understand, and but having this dream, so I feel like the Lord is so good you'll start to see patterns if you write your dreams down. So we talked about value in your dreams, and if you write your dreams down, you'll start to see patterns in the areas that he wants to highlight and that he really wants to teach us about. So I'll tell you the dream. I was in an ocean, and there was a lady in the middle cooking something. It seemed like something sweet. I wanted some, so I gave her a bag of sugar. She opened the bag, and at first she said she couldn't use it, said it wasn't sugar. I begged her to use it. She said she would, so she started molding and working with it. And then she handed me something. Then I'm surrounded by a shark trying to scare me. It flips me around, but I'm not harmed. I'm still holding the thing that she handed me. Then another animal, seemed like an octopus, slapped my back and left his suckers on my back. Then I'm in a forest, a beautiful forest with a fountain in the middle. And I used what the lady gave me to put in the middle of the fountain so it would work. Then I filled the suckers with what flowed from the fountain. So this dream was a challenge for me because just of all the aspects of it. So this is one that I have really just let set for a while and have meditated on and often ask the Lord, what does that mean? What did you mean by that? So we were talking just recently, and I was revisiting the dream yet again, mainly because of the dream series. And we were talking through it, and all of a sudden it hit me, it hit Ken, the vast ocean, the lady in the middle, handing her what I thought would work, which actually wasn't the right ingredient. But she took it anyway, worked with it, molded it, made it something new, and gave it back to me. I didn't know what it was that she gave me. I just knew that I clutched it in my hands. Then I'm surrounded by these aggressive, scary animals, a shark, an octopus. I knew right away that those weren't good. You don't have to think long or meditate long on that. So I'm thinking, but why? Am I about to face attacks? What am I going under? And I just kept asking the Lord what that meant. And then the part that would throw me the most was the fact that the octopus slapped me in the back and left the suckers there, like literally was like, and all the suckers were left on my back. And then I go to this beautiful forest. I put this thing that she gave me into the fountain, and it starts to flow. And whatever flowed from the fountain, I filled the suckers, and I was like, oh my goodness, that's communion. Like right away it hit me, like I gave what I had to the Lord. He gave me what he wanted me to have, which was far better, but I didn't understand what it was. But I knew I was supposed to clutch it with everything that I had, despite all of my surroundings. I never dropped it. Things are going to try to intimidate you and are going to, it feels like, are constantly circling you, taunting and intimidating, even to the point that you're hit physically. I was thinking about the things in my life and how many times, my health has been physically attacked, or my children's health has been physically attacked, or there's been physical things that have happened that have felt so overwhelming and painful, really quite painful, to then move me into this beautiful forest. And right away I just thought of like the Garden of Eden, because that's what it looked like. But there's this fountain in the middle that's not working. So I take what I'm given and I let it go. I put it in, and water flows. And I thought, as it filled the suckers, that's all I could think of to call them, they reminded me of communion cups in my dream. But I thought, no, octopus, they're bad. Those are evil. There's something that has to be ripped off of me, But God took this pain and filled it with his blood, covered it, used what I gave him, and from that place, this beautiful fountain was like activated. And out of that flowed and filled these things. But it wasn't just one communion cup. It was like many. Whatever I was carrying, right, it filled all of them. And it was just all of a sudden became this beautiful picture of what God wants to do with us. And the next day, the word that was given to me was pretty weighty for me. It wasn't that God was asking me to give up my family or, walk away and, try to reach the world and at the sacrifice, because those were things that haunted me. Those were the things that constantly taunt me. You do this, and you're going to lose it all. You do this, you're going to sacrifice your kids. Those were the taunts that constantly swirl and swirl and swirl. The next day, when this very strong, prophetic, humble, sweet man spoke the words he did over me, I just wept, and I thought, I can't do that, though. Like, I'm really not qualified. That's not my gift. That's not my strong suit. I would love for it to be. But it brought a lot of fear initially. But I've held on to this dream and held on to his word, and I've allowed just the Lord to let it simmer in my heart. And I think that's the power that comes from not just dismissing these things, right? And over a year, I don't know when we were traveling, but it was just a month or so ago, wasn't long, he brings this revelation to it. is like, Candace, you give me what you have. Just give me what you have. You know, it's not the right ingredient. It's really not right. It's really wrong, actually. But I'm going to take it and I'm going to make it what I want it to be. And you are not going to want to let go of it. You're going to hold on to it. It's going to be that special. You're going to hold on to it through every storm, through every taunt. Though many things circle you, you're going to value it and you're going to use it. And from that place, it's going to flow and spill over into so many other places. That's the power of the cross. That's the power of prophecy. That's the power of dreams. And that wasn't the last time the Lord dealt with this subject with me. And I'll share that dream another time. And it's such a between the eyes dream but it was one of those things I had to hold on to, meditate on. I'm like, oh my word, he's hitting this subject again about, I don't know, maybe 6 months. I don't have the timeline right now, but probably 6 months after this dream. Let's go back to it because I really need to drive this home because I really need you to believe it and put faith behind it, even though you don't feel qualified. So, yeah, you want to add anything?
Yeah, so there's a lot of assurance in dreams like this. The Lord saying, you have something that I'm going to use, and I'm going to use it for my glory. I'm going to take what might look like an attack from the enemy and give you something redeemable out of it. So just understanding, as weird as that dream is, right? How much value do you have for a dream like that, 5, 6 years ago, where you're like, well, there's an octopus, an ocean, a lady, a fountain, a forest. I probably should just not watch Lord of the Rings, but there's a lot of value in trying to get those metaphors. And so I asked her to share that one because today's dream that Daniel has is about the sea. And so I asked her yesterday, or this week, to share that one. And then she had a dream about the sea last night. So that one was a wild one. So we're gonna dig into that one, but that'll be making an appearance here towards the end of the series. Daniel is older when he has these dreams now, but he's alone. He's passionately patriotic about his nation, the nation of Israel. But his nation is in captivity. His nation's been decimated. His temple's been flattened. Everything that they'd hoped for is gone. And so Daniel's been fasting and praying, longing to hear from the Lord about what he's going to do. And in the dream series, The Challenge, there's a lot of things that I want to say about these passages, but I'm going to try to stay on topic about dreams. And the passages themselves are rich. So we'll do our best. But I think the richness of the passage is encouraging and hopeful for us. If we value God's voice and we value dreams and we're seeking his face like Daniel did, then he could speak to us in similarly profound and amazing ways. So we're looking at 3 dreams. Now, with Daniel, it's interesting because 2 of these, Daniel has a vision and then he falls asleep. And the NLT says that he faints. The ESV says he falls into a deep sleep. So these are more likely visions, the 2 of them, than dreams. Yet they teach us a lot about interpreting and understanding metaphor. So we'll clarify there, and as we go through. So if you don't want to count 2 of these, you'd have 25 dreams in the scriptures instead of 27. That's fine. But here we go. Daniel chapter 7. Daniel 7, this one's clarified as a dream, or categorized as a dream. Verse 1, earlier during the first year of King Belshazzar's reign in Babylon, Daniel had a dream and saw visions as he lay in his bed. He wrote down the dream, and this is what he saw. All right, what's our first practical thing we should get from this? You should write your dreams down. Would you look at that? Now, I tell people this, and I've asked 3 people this week if they've written their dream down, and I've been told no. So it's kind of just feels like this is like another pastoring series where you tell people something they should do and they just ignore you. But I think we need to write them down. You might say, look, I know why I had that dream. I don't need to write it down. Daniel could very well have said the same thing, yet this dream definitely set a course for him and for his people. So I would just encourage you to write it down. and share it. We've also seen from the last two practical dreams, the dream that Joe shared last week and the dream Candace shared, that they're intensely personal. And so, we're the kind of church, we talk very transparently, we seek authenticity, and you can't be authentic very long without either staying very surface or being willing to be humble and vulnerable. And dreams do bring about a vulnerability. Daniel 7, verse 2, in my vision that night I, Daniel, saw a great storm churning the surface of a great sea with strong winds blowing from every direction. Then 4 huge beasts came up out of the water, each different from the others. Now, you're going to see the sea, this body of water, outside the temple in a giant basin. You see this giant basin or you see an actual body of water, the sea, in the book of Revelation. So there's a metaphor here for what's happening on earth and God's purposes on earth whenever there's this large body of water. And I tell you that because if you have a prophetic dream involving water, if you have a dream that involves water and involves things coming out of the water or going into the water, then that helps you see that may be a prophetic dream of some sort. You may have a fear the Lord wants to speak to where you're drowning, and in your dream that's something separate. But if you have these creatures going in or people coming in and out of the water, then it may be something, because the Bible speaks specifically multiple times about the symbolism of a sea. And this is one of them. Then verse 3, 4 huge beasts came up out of the water, each different from the others. Now listen, this is a nightmare. I want you to know that. The word beast is used here, but I think if a child described this to you, they described it as monsters when you see the picture, right? So it was a massive storm. The water was churning. The waves were massive. There was darkness, and out of it came 4 monsters. And you're like, man, you should not have watched that movie last night, right? But this is a very powerful dream. Verse 4, the first beast is a lion with eagle's wings. And as I watched, its wings were pulled off, and it was left standing with its 2 hind feet on the ground like a human being, and was given a human mind. Verse 5, and I saw a second beast. It looked like a bear, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And I heard a voice saying, get up, devour the flesh of many people. Verse 6, then the third of these strange beasts appeared. It looked like a leopard. It had 4 birds' wings on its back, and it had 4 heads. Great authority was given to this beast. Then in my vision that night I saw a 4th beast, terrifying, dreadful, very strong. It devoured and crushed its victims with huge iron teeth and trampled the remains beneath its feet. It was different from any of the other beasts, and it had 10 horns. As I was looking at the horns, suddenly another small horn appeared among them. 3 of the first horns were torn out by the roots to make room for it. This little horn had eyes like human eyes and a mouth that was boasting arrogantly. Verse 9, I watched as thrones were put in place, and the Ancient One sat down to judge. His clothing was as white as snow, his hair like purest wool. He sat on a fiery throne with wheels of blazing fire. And a river of fire was pouring out, flowing from his presence. Millions of angels ministered to him. Many millions stood to attend him. Then the court began its session, and the books were opened. What a dream. I mean, come on. You got monsters in the sea, and then it transitions to seeing the Father, the creator of the universe, seated on his throne, attended by millions of angels, and the books were open. So he sees this judgment. So, very simply, without getting into too much eschatology, we have Babylon, which is the lion with wings, eagle's wings. We have Persia, which is the bear with 3 ribs, my understanding. And then we have Greece, which is the leopard with its 4 wings and 4 heads. And then we have Rome, and then Rome pictured in the Antichrist. So that's the kind of traditional take, regardless of your millennial view. That's a pretty common take. Most commentators in the evangelical world are unanimous on the typology. It's an echo of Nebuchadnezzar's dream that we studied last week, right? You got the gold head, silver arms and chest, brass abdomen, and iron legs. Now you have iron teeth for Rome, but you have these animals, which are emblems, which became emblems in their cases for their empires. So he uses these animals as metaphors, and then each animal has a number. These numbers are significant. The only one I'll point out or specify is with Greece, the 4 wings of the leopard. The leopard, Alexander the Great, races across, and you're going to see him in greater detail here in another chapter, in a vision to come. He races across, he conquers the world, he dies. When he dies, in his last words, he talks about dividing the kingdom up in 4, or utters the word 4. They take from this that he meant to divide it in 4. They divide the kingdom in 4. Out of one of those rises a man named Antiochus Epiphanes, and he becomes this Antichrist picture. Now, one rule of interpretation is whenever someone has a vision or dream, you have to, for context's sake, try to interpret it from their perspective. Daniel's not an American. Daniel doesn't see America, but he sees kingdoms that are going to impact the Jews, because Daniel's Jewish and he's praying about the Jews. So one thing that it's important, and it's helpful just in interpreting eschatology, is not to get caught up. And a lot of American churches and writers do. They get caught up because they're American, and so they Americanize the interpretation. Whenever you interpret somebody's dream, you have to think the Lord gave them this dream for them in answer to their question. Sometimes if it's prophetic, he gave it to them because they're prophetic, and so it is for somebody else. And in Daniel's case, that is true. But it is also a response to Daniel's heart cry, which is for his people. So, the church age is missing here, right? This is a mountain peak, a mountain range of prophecy, and you don't see the valleys in between. And so you see kingdom, 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 and then you see Christ, the Lord's kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, and you don't really necessarily see the church age in there very much, if at all. So he sees this amazing vision of 4 beasts. Verse 13, as my vision continued that night. So we get the idea that there's 2 parts to this vision, or 2 dreams that he has. I saw someone like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. Now, Daniel's the first one to use this phrase, and Jesus uses it a bunch to identify himself and connect himself to Daniel. So Daniel, in his first part of the dream, he sees God the Father. He sees the fullness of God, the glory of God ruling from the throne. And then as his dream continues, he sees Jesus, the Son of Man. And we get the idea that the Ancient of Days will accomplish his purposes through his King, his Son, Jesus. And so that's pretty awesome. He approached the Ancient One and was led into his presence. Verse 14, he was given authority, honor, and sovereignty over all the nations of the world, so that people of every race and nation and language would obey him. His rule is eternal. It will never end. His kingdom will never be destroyed. So this is repeated in John's vision in Revelation chapters 4 and 5. So this scene of Jesus being king, being given authority to rule everything, is repeated in Revelation. So that gives us some insight on how to interpret it. I'm not going to go there because of time, but just so you kind of understand the timing. The beginning of the kingdom, the idea that the Lord, Yahweh, is going to accomplish everything he wants through his Son, through the Son of Man. And there's this unique connection. So Daniel is getting a picture of the Messianic kingdom. And this is something that I don't think Adam and Eve understood. This is not something that Noah didn't understand, something that Abraham didn't understand. This is a beautiful picture in a horrible culture and climate. I mean, he's under his second or third king that he's been under. Babylon has fallen. Persia has risen up. He's just under intense change and intense pressure as trying to just maintain leadership and protect his people who are in captivity in this place in Persia. And in the midst of that, he has this profound vision. And again, don't let the scope of the vision cause you to lose sight of the metaphor that's in it and the potential that you can have visions that shape and alter the course of your family and yourself in a way that impacts eternity. This is Daniel and his heart cry for the Jews. And certainly the Jews have a special place, a unique place in the heart of God. but we are the sons and daughters of God as well, and so we have a unique place in the heart of God. So don't take a vision like this and just assume, well, I'll never have something like that. I think that this is something to hold on to and say, okay, I may not see the next 5 empires of the world in my dream, but I do believe the Lord can speak to me and help me understand what the purpose of my life is. And he can do it through his word, and he has done it in many ways through the scriptures. He can do it through the preaching of the word, but he can also do it through prophecy and through dreams. And if you raise your expectation, it's amazing how you'll receive, right? If your faith increases, right? If you're always praying that God would just move money around, then that's all you'll see. But if you start praying him move mountains around, you might see that too. So raise your expectation and watch what God does. Verse 15, I, Daniel, was troubled by all I'd seen, and my visions terrified me. That's interesting that he was in heaven. He had a vision of heaven and a vision of the Son of Man, but he's still terrified. And certainly this is something that happens when people get in the presence of the Lord. So verse 16, I approached one of those standing beside the throne. Now, here we go. Don't lose sight of this. Daniel's still dreaming, but now in his dream, he's terrified by his dream. So while he's in his dream, he goes and seeks an explanation for his dream. This is cool. So in my dream, I was bothered by it. I knew I was dreaming, but I want an explanation. So I just decided to go to the throne and asked him what it all meant. And he explained to me like this: these 4 huge beasts represent 4 kingdoms that will rise from the earth. But in the end, the holy people of the Most High will be given the kingdom, and they'll rule forever and ever. The interpretation continues, verse 28. That was the end of the vision. I, Daniel, was terrified by my thoughts, and my face was pale with fear, but I kept these things to myself. Just want to point out again that pretty much every dream we've studied so far looks like a nightmare. That's been the response. There's a lot of fear in these dreams. When the Lord speaks to us, it definitely has an impact on our spirit. So, this is the first year of Belshazzar's reign. I want to note that because his next vision is going to happen 2 years later. Massive storm, churning sea, 4 monsters, the Ancient of Days, the Son of Man, a conversation at the throne to interpret the dream takes place. That's a pretty amazing vision and dream. But it actually gets crazier than this for Daniel. And so we go to chapter 8. Chapter 8, during the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign, I, Daniel, saw another vision, following one that already appeared to me. In this vision, I was at the fortress of Susa in the province of Elam, standing beside the Ulai River. By the way, if you want to have a great vision, you should do more praying and fasting by rivers, because in chapter 10, he is standing at the Tigris River, fasting after 21 days, and in chapter 8, he's standing at the Ulai River. So we need more rivers. We need a river by our church. We could all stand there and look for visions. But here we go. I'm being tongue-in-cheek, of course. Verse 3, as I looked up, I saw a ram with 2 long horns standing beside the river. One of the horns was longer than the other, even though it had grown later than the other one. The ram butted everything out of his way to the west, to the north, and to the south, and no one could stand against him or help his victims. He did as he pleased and became very great. This is Alexander the Great. This is the transition from the Medo-Persian Empire into Greece. The Macedonian Empire into Greece. So after Persia, you have Macedon, and that evolves into the Grecian Empire. And again, even secular historians say this is historically accurate. What they say is Daniel was written later to try to explain it away. So they say Daniel was written during the Maccabean revolt, 150 years before Jesus came, when this is actually written 500 to 550 years before Jesus came. So that's how secular historians disagree with it. But the interpretation is there, the imagery is there. So to hold the scriptures literally as we do, Daniel's dreaming about things that now his secular historians say, oh yeah, that's exactly what happened, with very little variance. So verse 5, while I was watching, suddenly a male goat appeared from the west, crossing the land so swiftly he didn't even touch the ground. This goat, which had one very large horn between its eyes, headed towards the two-horned ram. And so here is Alexander the Great sweeping through and knocking over The ram, verse 8, the goat became very powerful, but at the height of his power, his large horn was broken off. So the Grecian Empire is historically unprecedented in the speed at which it takes the world over. And Alexander the Great is like an antichrist. He's a picture of Jesus. He's in the Bible before Jesus, not by name, but by imagery as this great horn, because he takes the entire world over with a sweeping scope, and then he dies at 33. So he dies very young as the most accomplished general in world history. So then you see this breaking, and then you see in the large horn's place grew 4 prominent horns. You see the dividing of the Greek Empire. Verse 10, its power reached to the heavens, where it attacked the heavenly army, throwing some of the heavenly beings and some of the stars to the ground and trampling them. Now, this is a bothersome passage. This is a troubling one. But ultimately, the picture is of this man, Antiochus Epiphanes, who became a forerunner to the Antichrist. He is the spirit of Antichrist to the Jews. He desecrates the temple, the holy temple, and that had been rebuilt under Ezra and Nehemiah. He desecrates it by going in. He scatters the entrails of pigs. He sets himself as a god for worship. He shuts down the sacrifices and the worship of Yahweh and puts himself up to be worshipped. It is a marked, awful time in the history of Judaism. And so the Lord gives specific insight to Daniel about what's going to happen to his people. It's a pretty wild vision. Now, just in case you don't think that still happens today, I want to share a vision with you that's just like this that happened 100 years ago, 150 years ago. A man named Efim, E-F-I-M, was a Russian child. He had not learned to read or write yet. And in the 1860s, he has a vision. Now, he already had a gift. He was the kind of kid who spent a lot of time by himself in prayer. He would ask his mom if he could fast and skip meals. And so as a 6 or 7 year old boy, he has a vision from the Lord, and he writes it out. The first thing he does, he writes out this map of the entire world. Having never seen a map, he writes a map of the world, and he shows his people in southern Russia. He shows the border of Russia and Turkey. He shows the Armenian encampment where they would go visit every year and do trades and have celebrations. And he shows this journey of the people crossing not just the Caspian Sea, but crossing the Atlantic Ocean, going to the east coast of America, which he'd never seen on a map, and then going from the east coast all the way to the west coast to Los Angeles. He draws this entire map by himself, and then he writes out what the Lord is saying, even though he is illiterate. He writes it out. What the Lord says is that there's coming a time when the Armenians and these Russian Orthodox believers are going to need to leave to escape persecution, that a massive wave of persecution is coming. They're going to need to leave, and they need to travel to America. They'll land on the East Coast, but they cannot settle there. They have to settle on the West Coast. Well, he's nicknamed the boy prophet, and nothing really comes of it for a couple decades. Some people read it every year and believe in it, everything he's written down. And a few years later, he has another vision, and the vision tells him the timing of it. And he writes it down, and he seals it, and he hands it to his parents, and he says, don't open this until I tell you to open it. So they have this sealed envelope, and they have this written vision. So every year, these Russian Orthodox, including the boy prophet, Efim, would go down from Russia to Turkey to Armenia, was called at the time. And Armenians trace back to the Church of Antioch. Okay? And they would do just a week of celebration, and so it became a certain man in Armenia. His last name was Shakarian. It became his job that year to feed everybody. Well, being an Orthodox believer, he was a follower of Jesus, but he kept Old Testament laws. And so one thing was, if he was going to feed everybody for a religious feast, he had to have a perfect, flawless animal. The only problem was when he went in to get his bowl that he was going to use to feed these several hundred people, the bull had damaged its eye, was blind in one eye. And he didn't want to tell anybody that this happened, and he didn't have any other animals to feed him. So he cut the head of the bull off, he processed the animal, and they all ate. But right before they ate, the head, one of the priests from the Russian Orthodox group, whenever they prayed for the meal, they would not pray until they felt the Holy Spirit come on them. And it was something that Mr. Shakarian I always told his son and grandson it's kind of weird, like we don't really do this. They're really excessive on the Holy Spirit. Again, this is in the 1880s. They're really excessive on the Holy Spirit. We don't do this, but whatever. So he's waiting for them to pray for the meal. They're waiting for the Holy Spirit to fall before they pray for the meal. They're humming, they're praying in tongues. And all of a sudden, the priest stops all the praying, and he looks at the hosts. He doesn't say a word. He gets up from his seat. He walks into the barn. He comes back with this bag that has the head of this bull in it. And he says, the host is terrified. He's so embarrassed. And he says, how did you know? He said, the Holy Spirit told me. He said, I know, Mr. Shakarian, that you don't believe the Holy Spirit still speaks like he did in the Scriptures, but he does. And he gave me a word of knowledge. And he wants you to know that you can hide nothing from him. As soon as he says this, Mr. Shakarian gets on his knees, and he pleads for forgiveness. He tells everybody what he did, how he hid this, and he asks this priest to pray for him, to receive the baptism of the Spirit like he has. And so the priest does. He prays for him. What was a tragic and sad and embarrassing and shameful event becomes now an amazing event of celebration because he is baptized in the Spirit, a follower of Christ, baptized in the Spirit, and all the stuff that goes with it happens. A couple years later, this boy prophet, Ephim, who was there at the feast, says it's time to open the envelope. They open the envelope, and it gives them specific instructions about how to leave and why they should leave Armenia now. And Mr. Shakarian, who did not believe in the prophecy and who kind of mocked the boy prophet, after having this weird experience of this head of the cow and the blind eye being exposed in this word of knowledge, he tells his family, I think we're going to leave. So they pack up and they leave. And they move to Los Angeles, 2 blocks away from a little street church called Azusa Street Mission. This is amazing. They don't know it yet, and the Azusa revival hasn't happened yet. But they are believers just like what's happening there. Meanwhile, things get worse in Armenia and in Turkey. And ultimately, those who don't believe will lose their life. In fact, the area was called Caracalla. And every inhabitant of Caracalla, every person at that festival who had not left, who disregarded the boy prophet, was killed in a Muslim genocide where they killed 1.5 million Christians. The reason it's not remembered in history is it happens right before World War I. And so the believers that trace their roots back to the Church of Antioch are all wiped out in this genocide, which was predicted 60 years before by a boy who was illiterate, who had a vision. What's amazing, though, is the family that moves, they have a grandson named Demas. Demas' life is spared because they listened to this boy prophet, even though it seemed really weird to believe in that. And he grows up going to the Azusa Street revival, and he eventually starts a ministry called the Full Gospel Businessmen's Luncheon, which is an international prayer group of businessmen that had over 10 million members and saw over 2 million people come to Christ in his ministry. So, and helped thousands of churches by connecting, resourcing churches through these businessmen. And that's his biography where he tells that story. So a modern day, relatively modern, a modern day vision to somebody about the future of their people spares thousands of people and warns millions of people of what is to come. So visions, as strange as this is Daniel, are still happening like this in our world. So if your kid has a dream and they write out a detailed map, please tell us. I think there's other morals to the story, but that's a pretty wild one. So Daniel 8, he sees this imagery, and then verse 15 of Daniel 8, as Daniel was trying to understand the meaning of the vision, someone who looked like a man stood in front of me, and I heard a human voice calling out from the Eli River, Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of his vision. All right, Gabriel shows up. This is the angel who's later going to tell Joseph and Mary, appear to Joseph in a dream, appear to Mary, prophesy the birth of Jesus. I mean, Daniel meets Gabriel. So the last dream, he's in heaven before the throne. This dream, he's meeting Gabriel. This is pretty powerful. And we see the metaphor, again, of animals. Now, I remember Jared sharing a vision with me last year in May, so it's been over a year. And it was a vision of a flag, and it had a bear on it. And we knew right away that The bear on the flag was related to the state of California. And ultimately, we would do a prayer room for someone from the state of California based on these prophetic words, based on these visions. But a critical piece that helped us know who to talk to and what to say came because there was a bear on a flag. And so then just a metaphor of an animal. I know this is weird, y'all, but we're learning how God speaks, okay? So he speaks, he made everything, right? And he loves to use everything he made to talk to us. So he doesn't talk to us through just our favorite TV shows. He made the universe, he made every animal, and so he uses all of these things to speak to us. Vision number 3. Daniel has a terrifying vision in which he falls asleep again. Daniel 10, verse 4. On April 23, which is a very significant date, I think April 23. Is that right after the resurrection, or is that? It's Passion Week when you go forward, or very close to it. Anyways, verse 5. I looked up. I saw a man dressed in linen clothing with a belt of pure gold around his waist. Now listen to his description. Ready? His body looked like a precious gem, which the scriptures describe Jesus in Revelation as being having feet of precious stones. His face flashed like lightning, and his eyes flamed like torches. Now, torch is what? Fire, right? So his eyes of fire. Okay. His arms and feet shone like polished bronze, and his voice roared like a vast multitude of people. By the way, if you're ever bored and need something to study the roar of God, the voice of God. It happens a lot, particularly in the Psalms. It's beautiful. Jesus roars. His voice like a vast multitude of people. So people are split on this. Again, like Melchizedek and other appearances of that picture Jesus, people are split on this. But it's very clear if you study this description, nobody's described like this except for Jesus elsewhere. Now, the reason people are divided is because later, this man shows that he was in a fight, in a conflict with a demon. And that's why he couldn't get to Daniel, I'm sorry. So that's where people are like, wait, so Jesus let himself be resisted by this demon and didn't bring the answer right away. So look at verse 13. For 21 days, the spirit prince of the kingdom of Persia blocked my way. Then Michael, one of the archangels, came to help me, and I left him there with the spirit prince of the kingdom of Persia. Now I'm here to explain what will happen to your people in the future, for this vision concerns a time yet to come. That's a pretty crazy vision. While he was speaking to me, I looked down at the ground, unable to say a word. Then the one who looked like a man touched my lips, and I opened my mouth and began to speak. So here's what I love. I think this is Jesus. And you're going to see Jesus do some really special things here. First, Daniel is really weak. Verse 9, I heard the man speak. When I heard the sound of his voice, I fell into a deep sleep, as the ESV puts it, and lay there with my face to the ground. Verse 10, a hand touched me and lifted me, still trembling, to my hands and knees. So he's prostrate on the floor. He picks him up to his hands and knees first. Then he touches his lips in verse 15. Verse 18, I should read verse 17. Verse 17, how can someone like me, your servant, talk to you, my Lord? My strength is gone. I can hardly breathe. Verse 18, then the one who looked like a man touched me again, and I felt my strength returning. So he picks him up from his deep sleep, and now he's in a kneeling position. Then he touches his lips so he can speak. Then when he tells him how tired he is, still how weak he is, he touches him again, he gets strength. Verse 19, don't be afraid, he said, for you are very precious to God. Peace, be encouraged, be strong. As he spoke these words to me, I suddenly felt stronger and said to him, please speak to me, my Lord, for you have strengthened me. So he picks him up from his just complete collapse. Then he touches him so he can speak. Then he touches him again so he can have strength. Then he speaks words that give him physical life. He speaks words that give him life. This is a passage that we should have been studying more in Sunday school. Maybe I missed a week where it was taught. But this is intense. Jesus appears 600 years, 550 years before he's going to come to earth. He appears to Daniel, a prophet who is overwhelmed by the vision. And he's so tender with him. I know you're weak. Listen, I want you to know something. You are very precious to me. So be encouraged and be strong. I feel like I should preach on that at 11. I mean, come on. You're very precious to me. Be encouraged, be strong. Why is that not crocheted on a pillow? All right? Where's that at Hobby Lobby? Verse 20, he said, "Do you know why I've come? Soon I must return to fight against the spirit prince of the kingdom of Persia, and after that, the spirit prince of the kingdom of Greece." That's where you kind of want to stop. Like, wait a minute. Can we have some more exegesis there? Right? Jesus is on earth. He's fighting. He brings Michael, the archangel, in to hold his spot while he goes to talk to Daniel. He's going to go back and fight some more? He's going to fight. Wait, this is like there's a whole thing here that we need to talk about, but it has nothing to do with dreams. So we'll have to revisit it later. But talk about spiritual warfare. The ministry, this is amazing. It is to me. I don't know, maybe Marvel movies have ruined your imagination, but this is crazy. This is true. Verse 21. "Meanwhile, I tell you what is written in the book of truth. No one helps me against these spirit princes except Michael." Listen, your spirit prince. Like, Daniel's just, by the way, I got one angel I trust to fight me in this battle, and he's personally assigned to you. So be comforted. That's incredible. Now, don't start feeling sorry for yourself and, well, I don't get Michael. I think there's a lot to be learned here. There's a lot to be learned here. J.P. Moreland has a book on miracles. He's a very respected professor. And he said 3 different times in his life, people who didn't know each other and had no way of knowing the other 2 people had said anything, told him that he had 3 angels around him. And they described their stature. I'll mess up the details, but as I recall, he had a tall one and then 2 shorter ones on either side, and they always were with him when he was teaching. And so he heard this, then 15 years later, somebody else told him, and then like 6 months later, somebody else told him. And he said it was just so unique that they all 3 described the same trio of angels as being with me in a teaching setting. They described their heights the same way and their appearances the same way. He said, this is a miracle. It's either a miracle that I met 3 people who are clinically insane and have the same vision. That's a miracle. Or it's a miracle that they actually saw angels. I was with Candace, and we were in Georgia preaching at Josh Smith's church, and a lady came to the church afterwards, and she prophesied over us. And she said, in very broken English, she said, "Pastor Ken, you have 2 angels, one that stands above your head, and when you feel heat in your head, you can do ministry, and one that stands at your right side, and when you feel a heat in your right arm, then you'll know you can do ministry." Now, she might not be telling the truth. But I'm holding on to that, and we'll see if it bears fruit, right? But it's interesting, and I thought of that when I was reading the book by J.P. Moreland. But you have this angel who's with you. Jesus says in verse 11, "I've been standing beside Michael to support and strengthen him since the first year of the reign of Darius," which, by the way, was the time when Daniel was cast into the lion's den. So you remember that lion's den story? Where the lions' mouths were stopped, hungry lions didn't eat you? Yeah, it's about since that time when I've been helping Michael out with your life. Come on. Never seen that in the scriptures before. That's the ending to the story of the Daniel Lions that we need right there. That's a pretty awesome vision. So the first half of this vision speaks to an attitude, that is of God's love for Daniel. And the second half speaks to an event, that is the fall of Persia and the rise of Greece that will come. That's in chapter 11. I didn't even get there because of time. So, interpretation. 1, these are very personal dreams to Daniel. Yes, they have eternal implications about kingdoms, but they're very personal to Daniel. And God is speaking to us in dreams. And I want to make that very clear to you. God is speaking to us in dreams. If you value your dreams and you'll write them down, you'll ask God for them, and you'll maybe not watch TV for 2 hours before you go to bed and stay off your phone. That'll help too. That God will speak to you. God is speaking to you in dreams. And so I want you to begin valuing that. As we value God's voice while we're awake, let's continue to value his voice while we're asleep. As the Song of Solomon said, "I slept, but my heart was awake, thinking of you." So let's keep our hearts awake, listening to the Lord, and begin to pray and ask the Lord for dreams. And many of you you're sharing them with me, not in public because you're terrified of the public interpretation, but we're hearing them, and that's been wonderful.